Yedidenu Avram Moshe Dice, the anicle of the man who had the moifis with the fish, he asked to share any stories of Mofsim, of Zayin, Teves, of the Eis Rotzen that I know about. I know many, but I'm going to share a couple of them. But first, I'm going to give a Hakdama about what the whole mood was in the Frum world at that time. Was incredible, incredible. That people heard it and people people joined and they brought in. There were thousands and thousands of people who gave in Tzedluch at that time. And the Rebbe went even further and said it wasn't just to the oil, and not only to the Mekomis HaKadoshim of the Nesiei Chabad or of the Overs even. It was any respected Rav who's buried, and the Rebbe said that they're all connected together, State and Svarim. It was a very wide-ranging statement. Now, this Motzi Shabbos, we had a Farbrengen for hours. I was there for 5 hours with the Shluchim of Europe and Africa by Reb Ari Edelkopf was the one that got me involved anyway. I think he organized it. And on it were a number of shluchim from England, including Rabbi Yonason Golem, who is a Rav in the community of Sheffield, England. Chassidish Yid B'Tachlis, a very respected Rav, very knowledgeable, Talmud Chacham, Yeshemayim Merabim, wonderful children. One of them was in our school, but another, all of them, he has a very, from London originally. Now, he told some fascinating stories, and I want to share a story that he told of a Moifis Golui, where he promised somebody something, Litvish style person. But before that, I say that he started off by saying, describing the mood at that time, and said that's what made the Rebbe a great leader in the eyes of the non-Frum people, the non-Chabad people, the Frum Yidden. But really, that was a good statement, because every yontiv you say that's the shar for all the hamshachas. You say Pesach is the biggest yontiv, and Shavuot is the biggest, and Purim is the biggest, and whatever it is, because at that day you have to see the mile of that day. But really, the Rebbe's leadership was recognized by anybody who wanted to see. Well before that, the big famous ones are things like the 6-Day War, the Hagdama before it, the Rebbe's promise in public at the Lag Boimer parade, and generally in the Sichos, and with answers to people, and much more before the Yom Kippur War. It was a longer build-up, and no one even knew anything was happening. And in Tavshin Nun Aleph, well, that was really later. Okay, so those two, and the Tmidim Kesidim of the Rebbe building up Klal Yisrael after the Holocaust and during. If you look at the Igros Kodesh in Tavshin Gimel, Tavshin Dalad, the Rebbe is talking about the Haman Shebi Yomeinu and what to do, and writing and building, not with Moistis, and not with Shluchim, and not with money, and not with Rabbanim, just any Jew that the Rebbe was writing to, man, woman, or child, is building up Yiddishkeit, and everyone recognized it. But I can tell you that by Tavshin Lamed, Dayan Grunfeld was a Choshever Dayan in the London Bezdin, and he was also a writer. He wrote many translations of Reb Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, known person, Dayan Isidor Grunfeld. And I had a kesher with him, certain things that we had to work together on over a few years in the Lamed. But I tell you, he called me up in Tavshin Lamed. It was shortly after the Rebbe's first public sikha was on Purim, Tavshin Lamed, about Mihil Yehudi. And this must have been, maybe Shavuot's time, or maybe it was later on. And he just heard about it. And he called me and he said that the Rebbe is risking everything that he built up. And the most prominent person who built up Yiddishkeit, he's risking it on this issue. And he said to me, no one can tell him a word. It's his decision because it's his achievement. Everything that he did, and if he feels this is more important, then certainly it's so. And he told me that he himself put out a pamphlet years before about Miu Yehudi. He sent me a copy, inscribed it, like a soft cover, a book about Miu Yehudi. Anyway, I'm just saying that the Rebbe was known as a leader, and even if they didn't show it as much as they could have, but everybody recognized it. But here, when the Rebbe said, here's the promise, and there was a Rav in Manchester, a very choshev Rav, teacher. He was a Malamed, a Mechanech, by the name of Rabbi Yonah Balkind, a very big chosed of the Alshich. I remember him very well from the times I was there. He was already an older person, and he raised generations of people there who went to Goyish schools, and he taught them, and they were all like Yedeim Mushlemim. He was a very fantastic teacher. And he went up to Rabbi Golem, and when the Rebbe said this on Zayin Teves, he said, well, how could you say such a thing? Do you know what this can do? You know what a Rahman what a devastating effect it can have. Saying such a blanket statement. And Rabbi Golem told him a very simple and brilliant answer. Just said, all those cheshbonis you're making, the Rebbe also knows them. Don't you recognize that? And he said, yeah, you're right. Okay. Anyway, so. And he was a 23-year-old Rabbi Golem, and he was all excited. And he went to Shver's house. And Shver was a Tayr Lubavitcher Chosid, but he comes from the general Manchester Frum community. And there was a relative there. And he looked, a cousin's husband, and he looked like a little bit under the weather. So he said, what's a Geshem? Why do you look like this? So he said that his wife just miscarried just now, and that she was trying a long time. They had a couple of daughters, 3 daughters, and wanted to have a son, and here she lost the baby at a late stage of pregnancy, and so what do you want me to, And it was like very frustrated. Akitza Maisa, he told them. Right, I don't remember all the details, they're not relevant, but what is relevant, he said, you write to the Rebbe. And that's what the Rebbe just said. He was telling everyone he met, he was telling you, the Rebbe just said, anything you want, ask now, right? Let's settle about it. And he said, look, I've never done such a thing before. It's not in my whole thing. He says, do you mind if my wife writes it for you, the cousin? No, that's fine, wonderful. So he said, I'm telling you, she's writing, and Ka'es Chaya Leleah Bain. The woman's name was Leah. And she wrote, and 9 months later, well, it was actually a premature baby, Simchas Torah, and Simchas Torah was born to them a Ben Zocha, and that was the last child they had. He was premature and underweight, but he's today like a big Knainahara, strapping 6-footer, and he's active there. And if people ask him, he says, yes, I am the Hey Teves baby. Not Chabad. He went to 770, he went to the oil to say thank you to the Rebbe that he exists. So that's one story from the Amunah Pshuta. Here in London, we're talking about the Zayin Teves, Tovshem Mem Zayin. Here in general, fax machines were already around in offices and companies, very rare in people's homes. It was hard to get a hold of a fax in a private house. It was late at night, an English time, when they never said the Sikha. We went and we were going all over. I was there with Talia alone. We were up the whole night, telling people, and we were looking for a fax. In fact, at about 4 a.m, I think, we woke up Rabbi Ben Zion Hackner, Olav Shalom, because we had to get into the office of Lubavitch Foundation, and we didn't have the key. And he was a person who worked there all the time, and he had the key. to get the faxes working. The faxes wasn't that quick. Not, today people don't even know what a fax is, but then it was like the most up to date. I taught a class about 2, 3 years ago, and I asked them, does anybody know what a fax is? Because I was telling a story about a fax, sending a fax to the Rebbe. And, no, and one kid said, is it an old-fashioned WhatsApp? They didn't even know what it is. So you had to write the faxes. In France, the Azimovs, Kanai Nahora had already thousands of Balchuvas on the one hand, and the other hand, they were well known in the country for having a lot of customers, and they were able to get Air France, the airline, to give them access the whole day to a whole, like a whole bunch of fax machines. They saved one for themselves maybe, but Chabad there was using those fax machines the whole day. Here in England, we did all the faxing, but also there was Rabbi Sudak Olav Shalom, who is the Rebbe Shliach to us, became our Shliach, the whole England, to the Rebbe to deliver the the panim, and he took. He went the next day on Zayin. He went to New York with a big suitcase, which was just packed, just with panim, just every. I'm not talking about a carry-on. I'm talking about a sizable suitcase filled to the brim, packed in with panim, and. So we're sending them. Now there was if a lot of people wrote. I never heard from anybody saying I was disappointed, but a lot of people wrote. People wrote Bani Chayim Mizayni. Thank God. Maybe they didn't, or they didn't think of anything special thing. But a person who had a real uh, something bothering them. So there was one person here. There was a younger man who disappeared, got lost. A lot of problems, whatever it was, he was already 11 years gone, and no contact. Family didn't know anything, and because of severe pressures, and the government didn't have any proof, and they didn't have any body, and they didn't have this, and there was all kinds of rumors and mices. That week, the government was about to give his wife widow's pension, like special money that they would give to a widow. They were about to recognize it. It was 11 years, and his son is a chassid. His name is a chassidish kid, and he just wrote one line: "I want my father to come back." That's all. He gave it in, and about maybe a week and a half later, his father was back with the family, and he spent all his very good Hasidic years over here in the community. And the chain of events which led him coming back, and that, and being able to face up to everything, started, I don't know if it was immediately on Zion, but very soon after that. I also heard that's a first hand that I know from here, from our community. I told you one that I heard from Rabbi Yonason, and that's not the first time I heard it from him. And one which we know here, which we saw, Inenu to Inu. And there's one other I'll say. This is not a first hand or a second hand. But I heard it was going around at the time that somebody came into 770 and walked up to the Rebbe and asked for a bracha. He had for Zahar Chaya B'Kayama, and the Rebbe gave him 3 nickels for tzedakah. And 9-10 months later, he had triplets. Anyway, those are some of the stories that we heard, and it's an Eis Rotzen.